I hope everyone can hear me. My name's Stephen Gorrard. I'm one of the lead editors for Review of Education, which we'll discuss in a little while. So I want to say welcome to all of you coming here so early in the morning. Hope a few more will arrive. What's going to happen is I'm going to speak for a few minutes about the process of getting published and some ideas about getting published. And then each of the editors of the 4 BERA-linked journals will discuss the unique selling points and advantages of their journals for a couple of minutes, and that will take 20 minutes in total. And then what we're going to do is have 4 different tables, and the editors will simply, the teams will sit at those tables, and you can come up and talk to us and ask any questions you want. So notionally, I think at the moment, that's Review of Education, that's Curriculum Journal, that's BJET, and that's Burge. I think I'm right anyway. Okay. Have I got access to the slides? Okay. Mainly, that is just a way of getting my email address up. So if anybody has any queries or comments or whatever after the session, please do email me, and I will get back to you, even if it takes a couple of days. So what I wanted to do in a couple of minutes, really, is to say how much fun it is to publish, particularly in a BERA journal, of course. But, I mean, it's fun, it's rewarding, and it is quite easy. So I'm going to mention a few things which are probably not conventional, and there'll be a few hisses from some of the more established authors here. But if you think about writing a paper, a traditional paper, maybe for Burge, of 8,000 words, if someone gave you the material to write, how long would it take you to write an 8,000-word paper? A couple of hours? Leisurely so an afternoon? And that's how long it takes to write a paper. That's how easy it is. The problem is not how fast can you type, and you can think faster than you can type. The problem is, have you got something to say? Because if you've got something to say, you can write it in I promise you, I've done it. When you've got a mature idea and you just sit down and think, it just spills out of you. So I would advocate sort of not worrying about things like writer's block. If you can't write, don't write, walk away, do something else. Just write when you want to write and when you've got something to say. So if you've done good research, some robust research, you've got some exciting implications, you will just write a paper. Obviously, in reality, it'll take you maybe a couple of weeks, not a couple of hours, because you've got all the referencing to check and things like that. And you'll go back, hopefully, and show it to people and draft it and redraft and so on. But it isn't an arduous process. Obviously, the research underlying it could be, or the conceptual work that goes behind it. But it's quite quick. I'd also suggest not writing, I'm talking now to new writers, don't write in a kind of academic ease. Don't adopt a certain style. I would just write almost as you might talk to people. Yes, you'll have to use technical language. There will have to be some complicated concepts. But I think just write as easily as you can. It'll be, it's easier for you to write. It's easier for people to read. Yes. Here's the thing that's, I think, slightly odd. As I explain in a minute, I have written quite a lot of papers. I nearly always pick the journal that I'm going to write for after writing the paper. Now, if you get some of those professional manuals on how to get published, they always say, oh, pick your audience, pick your journal, target the journal, write for the journal. But I find that really, really cumbersome, because I'm not entirely sure, despite what I said earlier, that until you've got the thing ready, exactly what it is, or even how long it has to be in order to encapsulate the story you want to tell. If you target it for Burge and it comes out as 12,000 words and you can't cut to 8,000 words, then you might be in trouble. So I tend to write the thing first and then think, what kind of journal would appreciate this? I know people do it other ways, but I find that more flexible, and I therefore appreciate more and more journals adopting a flexible submission approach, whereby, and as Wiley has done, whereby you don't have to use a particular format when you submit your paper to the journal. Because you know what's happened is, you write your paper, you send it to the journal, they're going to send it for peer review. Right? They may or may not accept it. We'll come to that in a minute. But if they don't accept it, you would really begrudge any hours you spend sort of moving the tables from the beginning to the end and putting the titles of the tables separately. Or in one journal I had to write, putting all the references into block capitals, or numbering all the lines, or numbering, which are idiosyncratic things that different journals have. You should be able to submit it in your Word document or something similar. If it's accepted, you'll be dancing with joy, and you'd be really happy then if they want you to move the table to the end or the middle or whatever it is they want to do, and you'll dance to their tune because you're going to get a publication out of it. But it's annoying if you have to format it and then reformat it if you have to submit somewhere else. So I tend to try and look for journals that are tolerant of the style that you are going to present your paper in. Once you've sent it, of course, you'll get a response to review. Hopefully it'll say, this is marvelous, we're going to publish it. It's the same as a PhD without corrections. But it's rare, particularly nowadays, because with electronic submission, it's quite easy to say, can you add a comma here? You don't have to reprint the whole thing or use Tipex or something. So people do tend to ask for corrections and changes. And then you just do whatever it is they ask for. And you write a little letter, which has the comments from the reviewers in, oh, it would have been better if they discussed more about X in this paragraph, and then you explain where in the paper you've discussed a bit more about X, and ideally say I use yellow, but you can do whatever you like. I put in yellow the section where I've discussed more on X in the revised paper. So you've sent it back, and it's really easy for the editor or the reviewers to just look at the list and think, oh yeah, they've done that, they've done that, they've done that. They haven't accepted that, but they've argued why they haven't accepted it, and I'm okay with that, or I'm not okay with that. Does that make sense? Make it as easy as possible for people to look at it and see what you've done. Because what you hope is, if it's revisions, like with the PhD where it just goes to the internal and gets waved through, you want the editor to look at it and think, okay, the reviewers asked them to do this, they've done that, fine. I don't need to send it off for another review. They can just publish it as it is. If it's more serious, it may go to re-review. You may even get a second round of corrections. But like a PhD, if you do what they ask you to do, it's very, very unlikely that it won't be published. So even if you get a response that says, we think this paper has problems, we want major revisions, as long as you do what they're asking you to do, they're kind of saying, we'll publish it. And you can celebrate at least with half a glass of wine or whatever, rather than the full glass. You're also going to get rejections, all right? And this is something I've said before, and I think people discussed it on Twitter. I'm estimating that I've had at least 50 flat-out rejections. You send papers to a journal, they go, nope, we're not interested, this is garbage or whatever. And was I disheartened? Yes, that was a lot. But over 25 years, I've published over 500 pieces in peer-reviewed journals, including the 50 that rejected flat out the first time. And what's interesting about it is that in many cases, not always, in many cases, the journal I ended up publishing in was deemed to be more prestigious, higher ranked, higher citation count than the journal that had said no. I don't think there's any clear link between the so-called prestige of the journal and the likelihood that you're going to get in or the quality of the reviewing. There's a little bit of a lottery behind it all, which is why when you get those rejections or critical comments, you can, obviously take account of them and think, is there anything there? Have I explained it badly? Have they misunderstood in the abstract or something? And change it accordingly. But don't take it too seriously. Sure, you're going to kick the furniture for a bit or something. But in the end, you will get something published if it's good stuff. If it's not good stuff, you shouldn't be publishing it anyway. So we're not talking about that. We're assuming you've got some nice research. It should be published. It will be published. I don't think it's cheating to send it to a second journal. I think I even sent it to a third journal once. It means that I've ended up being, I think Web of Science says I'm the most published author in the UK and the 7th in the world, apparently, which really surprises me because I don't feel like I've worked that hard. It's just been 25 years of writing stuff for fun and sending it off. I'm not suggesting they're going to write as many papers as that, but it is quite a nice and easy process. And you will get great satisfaction from doing it. A little tip then, if you're really starting out new, and you've never had any publication or any contact with a journal, two things you should try and do. The first one is offer one of them a book review. Now, our journal, Review of Education, doesn't do book reviews. Maybe some of the other editors will mention if they do. But I'm not necessarily talking about a Wiley journal. But with a book review, you're writing a short piece, maybe 800 words. You'll be sent a book free. So you pick a book that you want to read anyway, you want possession of, maybe a nice big fat SPSS manual or whatever. And then you write a review of it. You get the book free. You get a publication. It's a line on your CV. You've started making sort of friends with the editors and the board and so on of a particular journal. And in the olden days and in some journals, you'll still get a free copy of the journal itself as a result. So do think about that. The other thing to do, and obviously this is even more fruitful, is to offer to peer review for a journal. I mean, journals are desperate for reviewers. I mean, really, really desperate. And they'll bite your hand off. They'll probably, if you are really new, they'll probably put you as an extra person on an existing review team. So if they normally send it to 2 reviewers, you might be a 3rd reviewer. So the first time, and you'll do a little apprenticeship, and then once they think, oh yeah, this person knows what they're doing, you become a full reviewer. And I think that's a really nice way of getting to be friendly with a particular journal. It's no coincidence, I think, that whenever I send a paper off to a journal, within a week or 2, I get a paper to review from that journal. And you think, oh, I better do that because it looks like a tit for tat. And to some extent, it is that. We're doing it for free. So if you want to publish, you have to review. I have no patience with the people who say, I'm not going to review, and there are some. Sometimes you can't review, sometimes you're too busy, but you must be able to do it sometimes. In the Review of Education table, my colleague, Johnny Daniel, will be trying to build up a register of potential reviewers for Review of Education. So please, if you want to review, go and have a chat after the session. The last thing I'm going to say, general introduction, is just publishing a paper is only one part of a larger process of, what do you want to call it, engagement, dissemination, and so on. So, it might be that after writing 10 papers, you actually think, I'm going to put that corpus into a book or an edited collection. You might be asked on the basis of paper to adapt something for a chapter in somebody else's edited collection. And these are all good ways of getting stuff out to academics. But what about other users? Professional magazines. Obviously things like TES or the media like The Conversation. You can always just offer to say, I'll give you a précis of my paper. So you've got the audit trail is the full paper with all the information in it, but you can also write that, press releases. You could write a BERA blog, for example. You could give evidence to the select committee if you're in England or the equivalent in any other country. So do be imaginative about what you do with the paper, not just, it's a paper, I've written my 8,000 words, that's it, thank you very much, goodbye. Because I think what you want is for people to read it. And I'm really excited that the paper that has been most downloaded of mine, according to our library research, 90% of the users don't have academic URLs. So it was a free open access paper. It was about grammar schools, and it came out just at the time of the previous election when they were all going on about promoting new grammar schools. So it looks like large numbers of teachers and other users of research were reading this open access paper for whatever purpose they had, for or against. And there was like 100,000 people had read it, of which the majority were not actually academics. And I'm actually much more pleased about that than knowing that a lot of academics are reading it. Not that I've got anything against academics reading it. Okay, I'm going to stop there and change my hat slightly. So as I said, I am one of the editors. There's a board of about 8, including Johnny and other people who can't be here, who are the editorial team for Review of Education. It's obviously one of the stable of BERA journals. It's the most recent, and it's quite eclectic. So although it's called Review of Education, and we do take things like systematic reviews, syntheses of evidence, we will take anything. We've had quite short conceptual pieces. We had stuff on the protocol for doing what was then called qualitative systematic reviews and so on. our unique selling point is that we take papers up to 20,000 words, and occasionally more. We have had 25,000. It has to be justified. It's not just an excuse for being verbose, but if you really need some detailed analysis, or you've got a lot of data, or you've put together so many different things that you've got a big story to tell, then Review of Education is one of the very few journals in the world, let alone in the UK, where you can have that length of treatment. And if you go beyond 10,000 words, probably there's one in Exeter Research Papers in Education that takes 12,000, I think. But Review of Education is really, really special in that way. It doesn't mean we don't take traditional length papers, but it is a place where you can have that fuller treatment in a bigger appendices or whatever it's going to be. I won't say any more about it at the moment. What I'll do is I'll talk to you if you want to come and chat to us at the table, and I'll pass over to, well, Mark, you can do next?
I think we're in order on here, aren't we?
Okay. It looks like David. Yeah.
Hi everyone. So I'm David Aldridge, representing British Educational Research Journal. Last year we took on some assistant editors, so we're a bigger team than we previously were. So it's edited by myself, Emma Wainwright, and Gert Biester, and then we've got 4 assistant editors now, including Amanda Fulford and Christine Callender, who are here to talk to you later on. So I'm just going to deal with sort of the one most frequently asked question. We get quite a lot of emails as an editorial team. I've written a paper on, I'm thinking of writing a paper on. We get a 3 or 4 line description. Is this the kind of thing you would publish in your journal? The answer invariably is possibly yes, because we have no rules about what kind of paper we want to publish. You know, there are various lists all over the sort of websites. They're intended to be sort of extensive lists to indicate inclusion. They're not meant to restrict. We've got no rules about particular methodology. We've got no rules about a particular structure of paper. Over our tenure, we've published history of education, philosophy of education, large quantitative studies, small qualitative studies. And we really do want to be as inclusive as possible. So that said, I mean, obviously there's only so much you can say about that 3 or 4 line description. So the next thing is, we do want to publish the best. You shouldn't let that discourage you, because you may well be publishing the best. Often our reviewers will hold people to a sort of very particular standard. They'll give us a review saying this paper was very original, significant, it had this strength and this strength and this strength. I'm still not sure if it's appropriate for publication in Burge. I mean, we'll make that decision. You know, it is. So the first thing is, what that means is we accept about 15% of submissions. So of the sort of 500 or so papers that were submitted last year, we 70 odd made their way into the 6 issues. That sounds particularly selective. However, about 50% of the articles we receive, we reject on the grounds that they're not within the scope of the journal. So I'm just going to say a little bit about what we mean by the scope, having said we want to publish the best, we want to publish the best of everything. So, and I will say about that what we aim to do with those is we want to get the rejection back to you quickly. So often our rejections are not particularly detailed, but we want to get them, if we're rejecting it as out of scope, we want to get it back to you quickly so you can send it off to another journal that perhaps might be a better home for it. So I'll say the 2 things that we then say, what are we looking for? We're a generalist journal. To an extent, the generalist journal is a bit of a construct now. There's probably a disproportionate number of BERA members in this room who actually receive the physical copy of the journal. Most of our readers don't access it that way. Most of our readers, therefore, don't look over that back page, the very eclectic back page, and say, what's there for me? Most are accessing it by online download. But there are 2 things that we're looking for. One is we want, and you can read our 2018 editorial introduction to find out a bit more about this, but we want articles to be suitably reflexive about the methodology technologies that they are using. An example of that, it may well be within your field. You might be working in educational psychology, and there might be a measure for motivation and another measure for motivation, and no one's combined these measures or looked at the relationship between them. That's a perfectly legitimate and useful thing to do within your field. To a generalist readership, it's not obvious why we would be asking that particular question and how it can be applied in other areas. So we would say be reflexive about the methodology, give some indication of where that question is emerging from and who it might be interesting to. And the other one is that we do want those articles which are of broader generalist interest. Yeah? So it might be that your study just dealt with a group of schools in a particular national context. That's all well and good. We want that article, but what we want is for this to be the article where you have been able to make connections to questions which are going on elsewhere in educational research and practice, or which have something which other people designing similar studies in education might be able to take something from and apply in their design. So there's a lot more we can say in the Q&A later, but I think that covers it for now. Thank you. How do we find out who's next?
Sorry, can I just say, I should have mentioned this in my introduction, is what David said about the rejection rate. We have an agreement between the 4 journals that for some papers, if they're rejected because they're out of scope, but they're in scope of one of the other journals, then we can transfer it. I mean, you don't have to accept the transfer, but we offer it to the other journal. Not because it's bad, but because it may be about curriculum and it might be more suitable for the curriculum journal or whatever. Does that make sense? So if you see that, that's a good thing. And Wiley have agreed with some other journals, including some other publishers that are linked with, to also transfer. So it's a good outcome. It's not a rejection.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Muthu Kukurova. I'm representing British Journal of Educational Technologies on behalf of my colleagues Sarah Hannessy, Louise Major, Manolis Maurikis, and Sarah Price. I was told not to take more than 2 minutes, so I'm going to keep it very short. BERA is a prime source for both researchers and practitioners of educational technology throughout the world. We accept and publish papers on methodological advancements, conceptual considerations, as well as any empirical investigations of research, looking at the extent to which a technology intervention can advance learning and education. We don't have any particular boundaries in terms of educational settings, so we welcome submissions from any contexts that you have been working on, and we don't have any year boundaries from early years to higher education to vocational to professional learning settings. If you're interested, the impact factor of BJET is 5.2, and we currently are the second in generic educational technology journals in the world. I just wanted to highlight 2 quick points. One of them is that BJET is a genuinely international journal, both in terms of the audience of readers and in terms of the audience of authors. So you can see the download trends here, and particularly if you look at the country representations, you can easily see contributions and readers from all over the world. We are particularly keen in providing various ways of support to early career researchers. So if you have any idea, just even it is to get some feedback, whether it is an appropriate submission for our journal or not, feel free to drop us an email with your draft, with your abstract. Our colleagues and myself, we are very keen to just engage as much as possible with you to have this initial discussion. But also we have a toolkit, we have a fellowship opportunities, we have a critical friend arrangement that we could actually match you with a more experienced colleague in publishing in BJET to provide you further feedback on your submission. I have been attending sessions in BERA, and I was really surprised to see so many sessions that were titled with names that had no connection to educational technology, but the actual research would be very welcomed in BJET. I have attended sessions in higher education, sessions in COVID. Most of them were focusing on online learning, online teaching, or a technology intervention. So perhaps it's a little bit of a branding issue of the journal. So if you think that your research might connect to BJET, please do have a look at the journal. It's a genuine international and influential space to publish your research. I would be there to answer any of your questions, but for now, I'll pass it over to my colleague. Mark, over to you.
Good morning. My name's Mark Priestley. I'm one of the lead editors of the Curriculum Journal, and I was just struck by Stephen's comments about getting rejected. I once sent a paper to a journal along with a very experienced colleague that came back with reviews saying, "This is the worst paper I've ever seen. How dare these authors send it to such a prestigious journal?" We tweaked the paper a bit, ignored most of the feedback, sent it to another journal, and it was published without any revisions. So it does show sometimes how arbitrary this is. How do I move on here? Do I have the green button? Right, okay. My presentation isn't there, never mind. Okay, so the Curriculum Journal then is, oh, it is there, it's just appeared. That's good. It's not moving, no? Never mind, I'll do without it. So the Curriculum Journal is a journal, obviously, as the name suggests, it's focused on curriculum, but we take rather a broad view of curriculum here. Curriculum for us is around policy, it's about theory, it's about practices, and a wide range of practices, including the way in which education systems structure curriculum development, assessment systems, pedagogy, and so on. So don't take a narrow view of curriculum as syllabus. We're very interested in papers that are around a much wider range of topics related to curriculum. We have a particular mission, I think, to reinvigorate the field of curriculum studies. Curriculum studies has been in decline for quite a few years until relatively recently, and I think is enjoying something of a renaissance. And one of the things that we want to do through the journal is to publish papers which challenge, which innovate, which introduce new thinking, which challenge existing paradigms of thinking about curriculum. And we very much welcome this sort of challenge to what's happening. We're obviously interested in papers which are critical of policy, because a lot of curriculum policy is fairly homogenous, being inspired by international organizations like the OECD. And they're very active at publishing their own set of narratives around curriculum. We want to see a parallel and a challenging set of narratives emerging around curriculum as well. We're an international journal. Our editorial team is 8. Only 3 of us are based in the UK. We've got people from the University of Cyprus. We've got a Canadian associate editor, Finland, Sweden, the Netherlands, and New Zealand as well. One of the things that we're very keen to do through the editorial process is to support authors. So if you submit a paper to us, even if it is rejected at the desk stage without going to review, we will still try to give you some feedback on why it's been rejected. Once it's gone for review, you'll get a strong editorial steer. You won't just get a set of review comments, which is the case with some journals, but we give you a strong steer on how you should address the comments, and in some cases, whether to ignore the comments. We don't always agree with what the reviewers say. But what we want to do through the process is to ensure that you, as the author submitting to us, is supported throughout and gets a clear message and ends up, obviously, with a paper which is high quality, which we want to publish. So I won't say anything else at the moment, but what I will do, I'll just put up the team here. That's the associate editor team. I'm obviously available at the table at the back there now, so if you want to come and join me, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you.